just start by saying, in an administration and a world where it feels like every day a new boundary is broken, a new law is overridden, and a classic procedure is ignored. But I think we hit a new low. And let me be blunt. What the administration did in the last 24 hours is corrosive not only to our democracy, but downright dangerous for our national security. Yesterday, the administration convened a briefing for Republican senators, and only Republican senators, on the recent U.S. military strikes in the Caribbean. Along with that briefing, they shared the Office of Legal Counsel's opinion that tries to lay out legal justification for those strikes. Again, they didn't share it with Congress. They didn't share it with the Gang of Eight, which is their responsibility. They didn't share it with the Senate. They shared it with one political party. That is not how the system is supposed to work. That is not how national security decisions are supposed to get made. Matter of fact, just last week, in a very classified, secure meeting with National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he looked me in the eye and personally promised that we would have that Office of Legal Ethics position laid out. He said he hoped it had been delivered that day. Now, I'm not blaming Secretary Rubio because I know he left for the Middle East the next morning. But instead of honoring that promise, this administration chose to give this sensitive legal document to a select group of more than a dozen Republican senators. Not all on intel, not all, I think, even on armed services, on a purely partisan basis. Now, only when they got caught, only when word got out and senators started asking questions, did they scramble to try and make things work. They said, okay, we'll give it just to Democratic members of the Gang of Eight. This is not how the law works. This is not how Congress is supposed to act. Try to cover your tracks after this malfeasance still falls short of what the Constitution demands. And I'd say in any normal administration, somebody would be fired for this kind of abuse. So now, this Office of Legal Counsel opinion should be shared with every member of the Senate, not just the Gang of Eight. Every senator, Democrat, Republican, Independent, has a constitutional role to play when the United States uses military force. And to make that review, it's not optional. It's our freaking duty. When an administration decides it can pick and choose which elected representatives get the understanding of their legal argument of why this is needed for military force, and only chooses a particular party, it ignores all the checks and balances. We've seen this in other attributes. The one area that I thought we could maintain some level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, was around national security, but not from this crowd. You know, this is not about procedure or process or even precedent. When you politicize decision-making about putting our service members in harm's way, you make them less safe. When it becomes a question of whether America is going to go to war and use military forces, becomes simply a tool for partisan back and forth, you not only weaken the bond with our troops, but you completely continue to weaken the credibility with our allies, which has been weakened so many times. You even got countries like the Dutch acknowledging they're not sharing it in a public forum because they don't feel they can trust the Americans now. When you deny Congress the access to legal rationale for military action, you also do huge erosion of trust from our public. And again, as I've mentioned, you do real harm to the people who serve. The truth is, our troops particularly when they're going into an area that's such a gray zone at best, and you've seen officers already appear to be fired because they've raised concerns. They deserve to know with clarity, the legal reasoning of why they're being put in harm's way. And again, Congress has an oversight role here. This is U.S. Government 101. And frankly, not to be divided and used as political pawns. And the truth is as well, my Republican colleagues bear responsibility as well. You know, every senator, regardless of party, should have a say on how military force is used. And frankly, Congress has a right and obligation to understand the legal basis. You know, my proudest tenure has been on the Intelligence Committee, and I am proud of its record. I've served under Democrats, Republicans. I've been chair of the committee. I can tell you, Saxby Chambliss, Dianne Feinstein, Richard Burr would have never allowed this to happen. So the question I got from my Republican senators, if you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of 8 level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats? Who was willing to say, you know, isn't there a constitutional obligation here? You know, it is about separation of powers. For the folks who wave their Constitution around, read the damn thing. And then explain why you would sit through that briefing and not call foul. So I call on this administration to immediately provide not only the OLC opinion, but as well as the secret target list that was briefed, my understanding, yesterday as well. And this ought to go to every senator, not Gang of 8, not just the Intelligence Committee members, now that they have already broken the seal. Everybody needs to be read in. That is what Americans deserve. That's what every senator deserves. Not this cherry picking for political purposes. The country deserves better. And we'll see if anyone is willing to stand up and push back.